Welcome. This is the Drupal usability meeting for July 29th, 2022. I am Benji Fisher moderating. And also here are Brian Perry, who until a moment ago was sharing a screen. I hope you'll resume. Aaron McPherson, Antonia, Offer Schall, Ralph Kohler, Thomas Howell, and Aaron on his phone. So take it away, Brian.
Yes. So the issue that I'm looking for some feedback on is this issue 3227824. It is an issue against Drupal core that is adding the decoupled menus endpoint to Drupal core, and we're pretty close on this one. One of the last pieces of feedback that we've received, scrolling way down here. So there is,
85, I think.
Yes. But earlier here, there's a little screenshot. So this adds a API endpoint. It's not enabled by default. So we've added a configuration option for it, so that it can be enabled. Right now, there is just a checkbox that says enable the menu link set endpoint and a save button. And it was suggested here that some description text might help make it clearer what this actually does. And I think that is a good suggestion. So in a comment this morning, I just dropped in here a potential idea of what that text could be, pulled out from the decoupled menus documentation on Drupal.org. And that is enabling the menu link set endpoint will make menu data available at system/menu, menu name link set, where menu name is the machine name of the menu. I know that's a mouthful, but hopefully a helpful mouthful. But certainly not overly attached to that if there's other kind of common standards for a message like that or any other suggestions.
Yeah, Brian, I think if you reload the page, there are at least two more comments.
Perfect.
I know because I was busy cross-posting. So Bjorn suggested shortening the text a little. And I added a comment. So I guess just sort of a little background, that the goal here is that decoupled sites will be able to use the JSON data from this new path, this new endpoint. They'll be able to use the data to create menus in their front ends. That's reasonably accurate. Offer, go ahead.
I think it will be very helpful to add a link so people know, because it's a new feature and super helpful. I'm already using it in a project. A link to some documentation, Drupal.org, to say what is this thing doing. Then it'll allow us to keep the explanation short, and additional information people would go to Drupal.org.
Yeah, before we get too far into the weeds, let me just ask if there are questions about what the functionality is. And Aaron, you have your hand raised.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'm still trying to figure out how to use Zoom on two devices right now. I guess my first question actually kind of sort of similar to that, but I have a sort of a bit of understanding of what this does, but it'd be good to clarify for my understanding, but also for anybody else. Who do we see the target audience of this configuration being? What I mean by that is, like, is that something that a developer or a technical user is more likely to be enabling or disabling? Is this something that potentially a decoupled first, like, installation profile would already have enabled? So I guess because that would influence potentially what text we might want to put here.
Yeah, that's a good question. From my perspective, I think a technical user would typically enable this. I also think the idea of having this enabled in a decoupled first profile would make sense, but I'm not aware of there being concrete plans to do that. That's certainly something I'd love to see in the future, though.
Yeah,
it
that was
wouldn't
just
be
a sort of assumption.
It wouldn't be a content editor, it would be a site administrator.
Right. Yeah, so I think agreeing with, I was kind of going to suggest something similar to Ralph, what I think was it Ralph that just said, I don't remember, sorry, about kind of maybe keeping the text shorter, but just linking off to like a page on Drupal.org where we have a lot more space to explain what this does, because in that case, either you know what you're looking for and you know what this does, or you have no idea what this does and you're either following a guide or you've just stumbled across it. So I think keeping the description quite short and just linking off to a page that explains a lot more about this is probably a good way to go.
I'm certainly open to that.
Yeah, and if you look at my comment 90, the part in quotes sort of follows that. I suggested make menu data available in JSON format at, and then the system path. And I did also suggest having a link. Is there already a page we can link to? And if not, is it a big lift to add at least a stub version of that page?
There actually is a page we can link to. It's probably not that exact link, but this decoupled menus overview probably is the right thing to link to. Actually, I don't know. We could either link to
actually
just
that part you scrolled to, that heading, getting menu data, that looks like a really good place to link to.
Okay, that works.
Do we need to be explicit that this applies to all menus? I know that the text that you originally suggested said something about where menu name means blah, blah, blah. And my text did not make that explicit. What do people think?
I think that if we're linking to documentation, it's okay to not be explicit about that in favor of shorter text.
Do we even need to mention the path if we have this link? Make menu data available at JSON format, period, see link for more details.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I know already in my project, we already using it also in combination with groups, which then we created custom code and now we have additional URLs. So I'm just thinking this is just the beginning and more modules going to take advantage of it and might use a different kind of route or part of it. So I don't know if creating this would actually cause people to, like, again, in the documentation is probably a good place to send them. Just writing URL might confuse some of the use cases. That's my opinion.
But this would be for the core administration page, and the core only provides it at this path.
Right.
So would you mind scrolling up to where was there a screenshot of that page?
Yes, it doesn't have the description text, but well,
okay.
this is the form.
That's okay.
Least.
Yeah. Also in the URL, there's a language possible there as part of core that works.
Yep. Yeah. I think Ralph has his hand up. Let him go first.
Yeah, go ahead, Ralph.
Yeah, one brief question for my understanding. Is the checkbox on a single page, meaning, for example, for the one example for administration menu, in the tab link set, you have just that single checkbox and that's it?
Yeah, what I can try to do in the background right now is spin up the actual page so I can share that.
Okay,
but it is just this is just a single form on a single page. the
Okay.
options.
As opposed to having it available on a per menu basis where you could enable or disable the endpoint individually.
Correct.
Ah, it's global. Okay.
So someone mentioned the language code, which is a good point, and maybe since it might be /en/system and /es/system for English and Spanish, maybe it's better not to list the path at all.
Yeah.
I can see the argument there, but personally, I don't know. I think it's helpful to have that to lead someone who generally knows what to expect from this functionality in the right direction, even if there need to be a lot of placeholders in that. Because if I'm just thinking of someone who they know they want to enable this functionality to expose this endpoint, and maybe all they need is to click that checkbox and then go find the endpoint. If there is an example path, they can probably figure out where that is without having to go to the rest of the documentation.
Would it make sense to make it linkable? To make it even faster? Like once you enable, maybe only then you actually see the link. I'm not sure, but or maybe that becomes link. You can click on it and actually see it. But then, yeah, I noticed when your main menu is empty, you'll see empty result. Like you'll see a JSON, but it will be empty. So
Yeah, Aaron makes a comment in the chat. Enable this to make the JSON link set API endpoint available. And then he suggests link text. Learn more about the link set endpoint.
Yeah, so I would say that's probably as much as we need there, because then we can link off to the page that explains all of this. And as you said, if the audience is more going to be for technical people, we don't, chances are a technical person going to that link, they then either they already know what the endpoint is, or they will quite quickly figure out the endpoint from going to that page. I think
I don't think we need to start it off with enable this too. I think the description text for a checkbox is understood to be explaining what happens when you enable that checkbox.
maybe maybe we just have the description text, because the link text is already pretty good. So maybe the description text is simply like learn more about link set endpoint, and it's just a link, and that's the extent of the description text. So I feel like we don't need any more. It's almost like we don't need any more words than that.
And this is the option and where it is linked in configuration.
Right. So if you're going to that page, like, okay, so that's a specific page for this thing. So if you're less likely to stumble across this if you're just in the menu system. So I think if you're on that page, yeah, either maybe even that link then should be above, as a sort of lead text above the checkbox. So it's more visible. And then we almost don't even need a description, or the description is maybe just the link to the documentation page.
Or also keep in mind that this page could have its own help text. So that you've enabled the help module.
Yeah, would that be something that would be worth adding?
Aaron's giving a thumbs up. Is that for the suggestion of using the help module here?
Just sort of agreeing with what you said. Yeah.
Okay. Let me acknowledge a few more people have joined since we started the discussion. Emily Naveau and Simo Helston, thank you for joining us.
Brian, I forgot to look at this, but are there any permissions related to this? Or just who's allowed to enable, disable?
There are not new permissions related to this. If I can remember, it's tied to an existing permission. I can look it up. Going to take a second. This is the code for this is kind of deep in the system module.
All right, so let's aim to wrap up this discussion. So we have a few possibilities. One is that since we're already on the dedicated page for the menu link endpoint, maybe we don't need anything at all. Maybe by the time you've got to this page, you understand what it's for. Another option is just a link to the documentation or the internal help page. Another was my suggestion, something about providing JSON data at this endpoint. And then there's what Aaron wrote in the chat, enable this to make the JSON links at API endpoint available. Ralph, go ahead.
One small problem I have, or what I might consider a problem, is that in air quotes, hiding that feature under web services, it might get unnoticed. Would it maybe, as an idea, a reasonable step to add on the menus page, on the list overview list page for menus in the description on top, where at the moment it reads each menu has corresponding block that is managed on the block layout page, a second sentence pointing people to the web services, to making them aware that there's the ability to activate those link sets there.
I think all REST-related settings in Drupal have always been placed under web services. So a lot of technical users might expect this configuration option exactly there.
I agree with this one. I think it would be a kind of a strange situation where somebody would use this menu feature without having also other decoupled things. So at the moment, I think it makes sense. It's under web services, and people would learn about it. People who know how to use it would learn about it from release notes or something like that.
Yeah, I think that Ralph's suggestion was adding a link rather than and not replacing the page that we currently have. Aaron, go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm thinking about when we would normally link, like we typically don't do deep linking across the admin UI. And in this case, as we've discussed, the target audiences are very different. Like it's actually good that we have that separation and we're clear about that, because the target audience for the page we're seeing right now, the menu system is site builders, whereas the target audience for the other page is more technical people, developers, whoever. And generally, I think they're probably, this isn't the kind of thing you're probably going to discover and just, think, oh, what does that do? You're probably already either going to be aware of it, or you'll have, been reading a guide or documentation around how to do it, or it will be another module you've enabled. Because on its own, like unless you're building a front end to use this data or do it or have enabled another framework or something, this isn't like it's not going to do anything immediately different. So chances are you're probably following a guide, or you're probably having, something has already enabled this for you. So I'm not sure we necessarily need to do deep linking in this case. Again, I'm careful. I don't want to have confuse the target audiences either. Like site builders would then potentially wander across to this and wonder what this does. And then, yeah, I think, I don't think we necessarily need to do that deep linking for this.
Okay, so you agree with Simo that we don't need the extra link that Ralph suggested on the menus admin page.
Yes.
Can we get a quick vote on that? How many people agree with Ralph and Aaron that it's not needed?
Can you just explain what does a deep link means?
Yeah, so what I mean is like, when I say deep linking, I mean we're, right now we're 4 or 5 levels deep within the admin UI in a very particular section. So we're under structure menus. And on this page, if we had a link, we would be linking across to a page under configuration, web services, the menu link set. So we'd be deep linking basically between two sections that are very deep within the admin UI. And that's not generally something we tend to do. Does that make sense?
No, I still didn't understand what are the two options. Like it exists somewhere. We're talking about the description of what we're expecting, and what is the deep linking related to?
So the suggestion is that we add a link to this page. We're not removing anything. We're keeping the page under admin config web services, but adding a link to it from the menu admin page.
Okay. Thank you.
And Aaron is pointing out that we're going from 3 levels deep under admin structure to 3 or 4 levels deep under admin configuration.
Got it. Thank you.
I certainly like the idea of raising this functionality in more places, but I agree generally that I think it could be confusing, and having a link to something that's in the configuration and more developer focused doesn't really fit with the typical audience that is viewing this page.
There's one more thing I think I noticed. Until today, you would go to modules in enable to get JSON API functionality turned on. And now all of a sudden it's in a different place, where I don't know if people would be used to look there. Not that I have a solution for that.
That is definitely a piece of feedback that has come up repeatedly. And I think that is completely valid, and people will look there. The reason that it is not under JSON API or more closely associated with JSON API is technically the response here is not a JSON API compatible response. It uses a different spec.
Could it be called a module so it can be enabled around a similar place?
It definitely could be. It was originally created as a module in Contrib. The decision was made to have it have the endpoint exposed under the system module rather than have its own standalone module. I, off the top of my head, cannot remember all the rationale behind that decision. But.
And we don't want to second guess those decisions. Well, I guess Offer has a point. Making the whole thing discoverable is a usability issue. So maybe we're not overstepping our bounds here.
My my preference definitely would not be to not revisit that decision, for somewhat obvious reasons. But I think this is sparking my memory a little bit. I think one concern was that, you know, if we were to expose other other endpoints in support of decoupled functionality in the future, like let's say this ended up being the first of 5 endpoints that we added to support decoupled specific things, having modules for each of them might get a little unwieldy.
Yeah, that would be my next question, kind of related and more future looking. From what I remember, menu is a beginning of exposing more of the back end of Drupal, and more work is going to be done, but I don't know if it's going to be very similar to what happened with decoupled menus or different. And when we're creating that, should we plan for how does this thing grow? And maybe if there was, again, not that I need that as a module enabled, but JSON API was something enabled, and then you go and configure all the details within of what functionality within that you want to expose or not.
Yeah, I would say that the path in the future is not completely clear there, but I'm not aware of concrete plans for other similar non-JSON API endpoints like this.
And Aaron suggests in the chat that perhaps if we did something like this with taxonomy, it will live in the taxonomy module. So it makes sense that this isn't its own module. Brian, do you think that's accurate? That if we were to expose taxonomy information, it would be in the taxonomy module?
I don't think so, because right now that is exposed via JSON API. So I'm not aware of a situation where that would need some sort of special endpoint in a different format. It's not impossible, but
I should clarify that was just the first thing that came into my head, because I was trying to think of an example to support what you were saying earlier. So
Okay, so I'm going to suggest that we shelve the discussion or stop discussing whether it should be a separate module or not, because although it is a usability concern, it's out of scope for the current issue. Anyone disagree with that? Offer gives a thumbs up. That's not a disagreement. Okay. So, and Aaron also gives a thumbs up. Okay. So next question. Let's put it this way. Aaron, put your thumb down. Let's put it this way. Please give a thumbs up if you think that we should have a link from the menus admin page to this configuration page. I don't see anyone putting their thumbs up or speak up. Or say something in the chat. Okay, so we've dropped that suggestion. So let's get back to the original question. Okay, I guess we've got the screenshot, but could you actually show us in your running site?
yes.
So here, can you give me a thumbs up or say something or put it into chat if you think that we don't need any additional text? Who thinks that in context, this is as clear as it needs to be? By the time you've gotten to this page, you know what you're doing. I don't see anyone.
But we will have a link to documentation, right? Or that's not related to that part.
No, a link to the documentation will be the next option. Okay, so who thinks that we should have in the description text just a link to the documentation? Offer and Aaron and Antonia and Ralph. Okay, so there's quite a bit of support for just putting in the link. And I guess, and Simo, that's fine. And I guess you're allowed to vote for more than one. Who thinks that instead of a description, we should have something using the help module, which would only be there if the help module is enabled. And that usually appears near the top of the page in a separate paragraph or a separate block. Offer likes that.
Yeah, I'll thumbs up that and also the previous option. I think either of those are acceptable.
Okay.
I was gonna thumbs up that, but then you noted that it would only appear if the help module was enabled, and
Yeah.
assuming like, because I guess that I guess technically it could just be a form element. It doesn't need to depend on the help module, but if the best way, if to guarantee it's always there, it'd be better to do it as description, then that's, to me, makes more sense.
Okay.
Yeah, the way I thought about it, Benji, the way you presented is description would be there, in my opinion, as a minimum. And if the help module is enabled, you can get extended help, not just a link that go to documentation.
Okay. So again, to control scope, let's leave open the possibility that a later issue will add something to the help module or using the help module. And Brian, could you go back to the issue where we're discussing draft text? Brian and Bjorn and I each suggested some text. Who thinks we should have something like this, with or without a link? Oh, well, I'm kind of partial to my suggestion, of course, but I'm certainly not always right. Okay. Seems like the consensus is to go for just a link to the help text. Any further comments? Shall we spend some time wordsmithing the link text?
Could we also, it seemed like everyone was for a description if the help module is enabled. Could we do the link and then also have a description if help is enabled?
Yes, and that's what I meant by leaving open the possibility that a later issue will use the help module to provide additional help. And just for this issue, we would just be working on the description. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that makes sense.
Okay.
And I plan on creating that issue.
Okay. So what should the link text be? I guess my default is usually to use the thing I'm linking to as the help text, although that's subject to change. Should we say something vague like see the documentation for more information? Or Aaron suggested learn more about the links at endpoint.
What is the title of the documentation page that we're linking to?
It's decoupled menus overview, I believe.
Yeah, we could. I mean, we could go something like learn more about decoupled menus, or, well, maybe we should. I guess it's difficult because the documentation page is titled differently to the page in the admin UI.
So I guess my preference would be to use getting menu data as the link text and say something like, see getting menu data in the decoupled menus documentation.
How about a combination of a few of those to learn more about the link set menu endpoint? See getting menu data in the decoupled menus documentation. I guess that's saying that out loud, that's longer, but.
Other suggestions?
Yeah, I would recommend that we start the link with something with basically you'll learn more about or learn more at, because then we're starting the link with you know what the action is that the user's gonna, or what the user's gonna get when they go there, in a way. I need a more elegant way to explain that.
I prefer to say something like see link for more information. And that's fewer words before getting to the link, rather than saying learn more at the start of the sentence. But again, I'm not always right. Oh, we need some opinions. We have a shortage of opinions here.
Would it be possible to open a text editor and to see the suggestions next to each other?
Sure. One sec here.
Just while you're doing that, I'll point out that we generally want links text to be descriptive, so that if you're using a assistive technology like a screen reader and you're tabbing through all the links, the link text should be clear what the link is going to do. So I think
for
if we can,
example, you might want to include the word documentation in the link
right,
text.
yeah.
So what is a first option that we can list out here? Learn more. Just learn more at getting menu data. No.
Or you could copy Aaron's suggestion from the chat.
There we go.
Learn more about the link set endpoint.
Yeah, we probably want to tie, I guess we probably want to tie the description, the link text to the current context. So if the current page is talking about, is using terms like link set and endpoint, then we probably want the link to say that, so that the user is clear, this is where I can go to learn more about the page I'm on right now. I guess what the text of the page beyond that says may be less important, because at least they know they're on the right page.
And Simo made a suggestion in the chat. See how to get menu data using link set feature. And how much of that would you want to be the link text? and my suggestion. And then he suggests endpoint rather than feature.
Benji, I'm sorry I missed some part before I had to go, but did we go back to displaying a menu structure, for example, for people who enable that in click and see it right away?
So we talked about that, and one problem is that you'd have to choose a particular menu, otherwise I think the link doesn't work, and you don't know which menu to choose. I mean, you could try the main menu, but that won't always work. And
Yeah,
if it's
I mean,
not reliable,
admin always worked for me because I am already administrated to do it, and they get a giant, amazing menu. But it's impressive to see that it works right away. I just thought it's a nice, it would be really nice. You enable, you see right away where to go. Thumbs up, it works.
I think I like the idea, but I would probably leave that to a follow-up issue. And I think you kind of touched on a point there where I'm sorry, this is going to bleed into developer experience, but we don't have a great way of bringing together all of these things in one UI where you can see, like, you can easily, see all these endpoints, like whether it's a JSON API or decouple menus, whatever. So I would strongly suggest we put that to a follow-up, but also it should be considered in a wider context of how do we expose all of these, how do we make all these APIs easy to find in one place?
I had a wild idea that might be too wild. I thought of like creating an iframe there with the link set right there. You see in the same screen, how does it actually look without even leaving it to go somewhere else?
I think that's more than we need. I suggested something, making menu link documentation. I'm thinking of Aaron's point earlier that for accessibility, we have to be clear that this is a link going to documentation. And I think menu link documentation isn't quite right. Menu decoupled menus documentation. Maybe I should look at what your current proposals say. Decoupled menus. So I guess see the decoupled menus documentation for more information is what I should really be saying. So we're actually probably not going to have time to discuss another issue. We have a little more than 10 minutes left in the hour. How many different options do we have here?
5 listed here.
Shall we go to a straight vote on those 5 options, or shall we consolidate a little bit? Let's go to a straight vote using approval voting, meaning you're allowed to vote for more than one if you think it's good enough. Can you highlight the first one, Brian?
Yes.
So, well, we've technically got 4 because the first one is, well, I was going to say it doesn't really go with the idea from earlier, but oh, maybe it's okay. Let's just ignore me. It's fine.
Okay.
Can we just, I think Aaron maybe mentioned it earlier. Did we talk about just writing it as enable the JSON links at API endpoint?
That's very close, I think, to what the checkbox already has as a label.
Uh-huh.
So I feel like that would be redundant if there was also a placeholder, description that had that statement.
Oh, so all that is below the enable?
Yes.
Yeah,
we're
the
talking
text
about
that we're
the-
talking about essentially
The placeholder
goes
description would include, okay,
here.
thank you.
All right. So again, can you highlight the first suggestion?
Yes.
And who approves of this suggestion? I don't see anyone in favor of that one. Let's go on to the second one. And who approves of this one? I see one thumbs up from Aaron for that. The next one. I see Aaron, Antonia offer, Brian, I'll give a thumbs up. Emily approves of that. Okay, so that's a strong contender. I'm not sure, is all of this supposed to be the link text? I guess this was my suggestion. I would say see how to should not be part of the link, but yeah, so we could start the link with menu data. Who approves of this one? I'm not sure that I'm going to approve it, even though I suggested it. Okay, and the last one. Antonia, I like it. Simo likes it. Brian and Ralph, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so we have 2 strong contenders. What was it? The second one?
Yes. No, I believe it was this one. Learn more
Okay.
about the menu link set endpoint.
Yes.
Making the whole sentence the link text. So at this point, we could either provide 2 options and let the people working on the issue choose, or we could have a final vote amongst ourselves.
I could say that I actually like very much the fact that it says the link is going to the documentation. So it kind of tells you where it's going to.
So you prefer the second option,
Yeah,
where
so it kind of
documentation is part of the link text.
yeah, so it kind of tells you where you are going, not only what you will find when you're there.
Yeah, I think that's my favorite too.
One other advantage to the second one, see the decoupled menus documentation. I think that there will be things that will probably change in that documentation, but that entry will definitely be there.
Okay, so let's have a final vote with just these 2 options. Who prefers the first option? And who prefers the second option? Oh, I'm sorry, Aaron, you're voting for the first one? And who prefers the second option? And I do too. And offer. Okay, that looks like a pretty good consensus. Okay. Yay. Aaron voted for both. Okay.
Excellent.
And Brian, I assume you'll add a comment to the issue.
Yes.
And we have just 5 minutes left. There were a couple of people who joined late. I want to give you a chance. Is there any other issue you'd like to bring up? Like, we can't get into a long discussion about it, but anything you'd like to say at this point? Any other closing remarks, or shall we just end like 3 minutes early for once?
Have a good weekend.
Okay. Yeah, thank you all for coming, and hope you can make next week's meeting.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Appreciate
Thank
the
you.
feedback.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
Have a
Yeah,
nice weekend.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.
Bye.